What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today I have Bobby Harris on as a guest, and we are going to be talking about something that I think is super important, and that is marketing at your trade shows. Too often, from my experience in this industry, is that people view trade shows as a sales function. It's not. Sales are the executors, and marketing tees it up. Marketing has to start viewing trade shows in a campaign function. And we are constantly getting questions. How do we drive traffic? How do we stand out? How do we execute at a trade show? And one of the biggest pieces that I think companies miss is the pre-show, during show, and post-show marketing. How to market yourself, drive traffic, set appointments, create a presence at this trade show. Bobby, thanks for being here, and thanks for talking about this with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I know that this is a struggle for a lot of event marketers or event sales, because marketing sometimes falls by the wayside when it comes to events. Yep. I think there's a huge opportunity here for brands and everyone that can get involved on this.
Awesome, man. Tell me a little bit, tell people why you're here, your background a little bit, so they know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I've got a really diverse background, but primarily like the events piece of what I do or did, I did live music promotions for years. Kind of the start when everything went digital, that's kind of when I got started. So we were on MySpace promoting shows when traditional media outlets started to fail getting people to shows. And I transitioned slowly from that into owning digital marketing agency, Hey Digi here in Nashville, and what I do full time now.
Nice, man. Cool. All right, so let's just jump to this. The way I want to set up this episode for somebody is, because most of our listeners are event marketers, right? They're in the marketing space, but they are obviously handling their face-to-face events. So I want to talk right now specifically. Let's say we have an event marketer listening. They have their big annual trade show that's coming up, right? It's 6 months prior. They're starting to plan. And the question that's on a lot of people's mind, and I think at least high-level event marketers who know what they're doing, is they are thinking about how to pre-show market. They're trying to set up a campaign. So let's kind of run somebody through, what would you be thinking about? What are things you're considering to market your company being at this trade show?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is, who are you trying to reach? Like, what is that avatar? Determine who that is, and that determines how you speak. Your message is the same, but how you speak to different people. I speak to my 4-year-old different than I speak to my 17-year-old. It may be the same message, but I speak differently. Who is your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Determine that first thing. And as you determine that, then what is your message? Refine it, because whatever your overall brand message is going to be we're going to be more pinpointed at an event. Whoever the audience is at that event, we're going to be tweaking our message to speak to them. And then what is the objective? Is the objective sales? Is it awareness? What is your objective? So knowing those three pieces before you even go any further is key. And a lot of people don't even consider that. They're like, we're just going to set up a booth. We're going to run with it. We're going to have a presence. That's not effective. You have to know who you're speaking to, what you're saying, and what is the point of what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. So what data do you have access to? Because data is king, right? Like, we need data. From this point, once you determine who your audience is and what your message is, it's all about data. So what data do you have access to? Can you purchase the previous attendees list? If you can, is it a good list? Those are always,
gotta scrub it. You gotta do a little research with it. Yeah.
Is the list good? If you can't purchase the list, can you tap into their list so that you can be included in their email blast to their...
I like that, because it goes back to what I said in the beginning here when I set this up, is essentially that I have seen for years companies view trade shows as a sales function. It is not. It's not at all. The best companies that we've worked with, that I've watched, seen them, it's a marketing function. Sales comes in and closes. They execute, they follow up. It's a part of it. It's very much a dual function. So I love what you said about knowing the audience, understanding that, right? I think that's a really big piece. Let's talk about like contacts. Once you do know that audience, I think people struggle with, where do they find them? How do they set meetings? What do they do with contacts? I mean, my number one thing is thinking to myself, your customers there, current customers, who are the prospects? Can you buy an attendee list from the previous year? Can you get an attendee list from the current upcoming year? And then from there, what are kind of some options that you have once you've identified that persona or identified customers and audience? What do you think would be some steps or things you think that event marketers should be considering? Sponsorship, almost like a sponsorship option where you can pay to send emails. Gotcha.
Yeah. So their third-party data, we can make that your first-party data. That's really kind of key. If they send a sponsorship email, whatever, and then you have all the retargeting measures and everything on your site, maybe a good lead magnet, then that data becomes first-party data. You can retarget them wherever they go. So that builds that pre-show awareness that you really want to have before you even get there. I think most people are skipping that step fully. They're not even understanding. If you can't tap into or purchase a list, can you then get the people from their attendee list to get to your website so that you can have that first party data to retarget them, have a solid lead magnet on the site so you get the emails, phone numbers, all of those fun things.
That's great. I think it is challenging, just so event marketers know, it's hard to understand who's going to be there. It's hard to know who are the people that you're hoping are there that you don't know, right? But essentially, you have to use all your resources available to you to get as much data as you can. The other piece is, I think, if you're exhibiting year over year, you have to collect data. You have to collect your own, right? And I think something that I stress to people is marketing. When you're running your trade shows, you have to get in touch with sales. You have to communicate. You have to work together prior, because I'm a big believer in email campaigns. I just think if you do them right, they work. I just think they do. I think that too many people email, it could be a whole nother episode, just how poorly they run email campaigns, right? But leading up to it, if you have decent lists, if you can test a list, if you have current year's, your own data, right? I'm coming up with campaigns and I'm running email campaigns prior that show, right? I'm creating some personable, fun, standout type emails, trying to get people, what's the hook of them wanting to visit you? Because you're not trying to get anyone to visit you. You're trying to get the people that you want to visit you. So if you have an email list of, 8,000 people, you're not trying to get 8,000 people to come see you,
So on the quality of a list, that's really kind of important. I worked with one of the most recognizable brands in the world, literally. They'll remain nameless for this, but I promise they are one of the most recognizable in the world. And the email lists that we would get from them were the worst, because they were giving away a very high price ticket item at an event. And who doesn't want to win an expensive item? Like,
everybody's putting their name in the hat.
Everybody. And their target demographic was 1.5% at best of the population. So everyone's in there, and it was a horrible list. So quality of your list matters. And that's why testing the list is very important. And if you can segment the list based on engagement and things of that nature, extremely important. And I would also, on a secondary note, testing the email list with content. What content are people engaging with? That'll kind of give you an idea of who it is opening the email, and are they the quality people that you're trying to hit? So if you're sending out an email blast that's just a general fun email, and everyone's opening it, engaging with it, that's one thing. But if you send out one with really clear marketing messaging, like how to implement at a trade show, now the people that are opening that one with the subject line that is very specific, those are people that you really want to tap into, and you want to drill down as far as you can with those people to make sure you have a presence in their mind prior to the trade show even.
I want to go back to that and ask you about ads, right? I want to talk about ads with data running prior a show, because I think you can do some, like you said, if you're getting people to go to your website, you can start retargeting, things of that nature. I just want to make one thought on this is I keep going back to including sales with marketing, right? And what is the prep work that sales is doing prior being at this show? Are they trying to set appointments? Are a few of their biggest customers there? I mean, it's not always just prospects, it's customers too. So are they emailing the customer? Hey, are you or anyone going to be there? Let's set some time. What are you looking to do? Are there prospects that they've been after for 5 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years? Are they trying to set meetings in tandem with marketing? Because it takes both prepping leading up to this. So I just wanted to get that out there, because I think it's such a piece that people miss. It's crazy. But talk to me about pre-show. We've talked about data and collecting the best you can, right? There's only so many resources that you have, right? there's research and scrubbing lists, buying lists, obviously past data, but like, what are you doing outside of maybe email marketing, some organic social? What's maybe like some ads, retargeting? What are some things that you possibly think that people should be doing?
Yeah, so I would say on the ads piece, that would go along with your organic social. So I would say 3 months out, whatever your messaging is that you want at the trade show or the event, start refining that on your organic social. Start looking to see what messages people are hitting strongly with people, and use that organic social piece to kind of direct your ads content piece. Because the purpose of ads at this point is awareness with people that are going to be at the event. So you want to have a message that people are already resonating with, and then use that message and then just really magnify it and get to the audience pretty consistently. Another thing that, leading up to, I think sales and marketing need to be working together. Marketing needs to be communicating with sales. This messaging's hitting, these audiences are responding, so the sales can start to have an idea of who's going to be there, how they need to message, how the messaging needs to be tweaked for the event. But really important is with the content or the email piece, actually, I would say the open rates, who's opening those, the individuals that are opening those, making sure that's getting passed on to sales. So if there's something in there if there's a name in there that stands out, sales can really hit that hard and start to build the groundwork prior to the event. Another fun thing that my friend Pablo, Pablo, I believe, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One thing he did at an event was he did a post, like I think it was first night, did a karaoke party, like a spontaneous. I think that was a terrific idea to plan ahead of time and say, hey, after the event tonight, we're planning this get together. We want to invite you as a customer, a customer that may be there or a client, and then also do some outreach. Make it something outside of the trade show where and have some salespeople there where they can be personable, not selling necessarily, but setting the groundwork for the sell through the rest of the event. I'm a big fan of stepping outside of the traditional model for everything. And I've seen it work time and time again with events in particular.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about messaging a little bit, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. And I find, as we are talking to our customers over the years, and as we're diving deeper into getting understanding about them, their audience, their brand, their value prop, their differentiation, all of these are all marketing terms. There's all marketing things that very good marketers do. And I think when it comes to messaging, when you're going to a trade show, one of my main takes at this point is that you need to be understanding how you differentiate and position yourself in your segment, right? Meaning most of the time, your biggest competitors are near you. So what's the difference between you and them? How are you positioning yourself compared to them? And I think that takes really good, simple, specific messaging. And it also takes understanding what's the difference between you two. So I don't see enough companies thinking about messaging. I don't see enough companies using, they use their big companies, they get stuck and, they've used the same line forever. And but it's like, what is your advice to people on messaging prior going to a trade show? Because I think it's big. It's what we're talking about. It's like pre-show, during show, post-show, the booth, the experience. You're tying it all together.
I think the big piece is what will make you, I would say, get outside of the mindset of a trade show, because I think that's where, like, the traditional trade show, the traditional event, everyone goes into it with the same mindset. And I mean, that's great about what you do. You come at it from a different angle. Your displays, everything is totally different, your booth design. But I think the mindset behind companies and brands and individuals at these things are often the same thing for every event. It needs to be a connection point. So what makes you connect with the individual? Because you're face to face with them. This is not video. This is not audio. You're actually speaking directly to the person. So what makes your display, your people at the display, what sets that apart and makes it a conversational piece, something friendly, something engaging, more so than, oh, we're here, we look great. Like, that's wonderful. Like, you could design the best booth in the world for somebody, but if they're not engaging in conversation and building a relationship, how far is that going to go?
So kind of just to explain further what you're talking about, because we're actually in the process of creating our own trade show booth for, we're going to exhibit, right? And this is some of the stuff that we're going through ourselves and doing, because obviously we help our customers with it. We're just doing our own process now. And I think that point is so spot on about the messaging, because it does come down to, when you're in there, how are you opening these conversations, right? Where are you leading conversations? And that goes to me, do you have a theme? Do you have a concept that ties into what you want to tell people? Right? Because if you just have this ridiculous theme that you think is cool, someone's like, why do you have a gorilla floating in the air like a Macy's Day Parade balloon? And you're like, oh, we thought it would be cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But if you have something outlandish, something visually engaging, a theme that they're like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Why? You know, have it open a conversation to your product, to your service, to your value proposition, to the reason, the method that problem you solve for them, right? I mean, am I on this right with what you're saying?
Yeah. I think the important, like, absolutely. So those are two pieces. Like, you have an amazing display, your messaging, but then how are you using that to build a small community at the event? I mean, it's temporary, but it needs to build that, because that builds trust. I'm a big fan of the idea of trust equity. Stephen Covey talks about it in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And that one little piece of trust equity stood out to me so much. You have one time to build trust equity at an event. So what are you doing to do that? And relationship is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I'm honestly pumped we're talking about this, because I love this stuff. And then I just see so many people missing this stuff and not even factoring it, you know?
Yeah.
And you could take a massive deep dive into this stuff. It's marketing, right? And I think what I'm really trying to encourage people to do is, when you're going to a trade show, think like marketers. Involve sales, because marketing needs sales and sales needs marketing. It's that simple. It's always that way. All right, let's move into more during the show, right? Because obviously there's efforts you can make during the show. I would say the number one effort, the simplest, most basic I see, is sponsorship opportunities through the events, right? Events are getting smarter now. They'll give you a sponsorship list of 20 different sponsorships that are available. They're typically a menu from most expensive to least. I've actually had clients ask us before, which one's the most effective? And I say, hey, look, there's no magic bullet, but essentially they're pricing them by demand, just so you know, right? Yeah. So demand will lead the way, but I think that would be a during the show marketing. That would be one thing I would bring up to people, is I do believe in those sponsorship opportunities, but you have to mesh it with who you are. If you're not a great speaker, if you're not a great networker, don't do a networking one. Right? Don't do one where you host a lunch and you talk for 5 minutes, right? So you have to know who you are, your product, your service, and try to tie it in. And that would be the first one I would lead off with, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on during the show, during the event marketing.
Yeah, no, so I think that the sponsorship piece is great. And a lot of times you can build into the package digital presence with the sponsorship prior to the event and after the event. So I think that's key when you're looking at it. What is the price of the sponsorship package? What is included beyond on-site? What are you getting prior to and after the event, post event? When you look at that, there's more that you can factor in than, oh, I just get this amazing presence at the event. Sometimes you can actually negotiate too. You can get a smaller package with front end and back end support as well. Before and after. So I would suggest, looking at the packages and trying to negotiate your way through that. At the event, there's so many things you can do. Again, it's about engaging. Like, how can you get people to your booth and engage with your booth? What kind of presence can you have that can drive a digital awareness too at the event? Putting the event with media, like having a media team, if possible, at the event, huge. If you could have wonderful photographers on hand that are sharing photography and tagging people there that are stopping by the booth, that gets the organic sharing nonstop. So highly suggest that type of thing. Video as well, if you can utilize video content. Doing live interviews with potential clients or even existing clients again, that would be an amazing piece of advice that I would offer anyone that's doing an event.
I think what you're alluding to a little bit, or what it makes me think, is thought leadership, right? Essentially, when you're there, marketing yourself at a trade show, I think, is all about looking busy, all about having something going on, all about things, you don't want it to be not authentic, but essentially photography, videography, conversations, right? Are you sitting down with people? Do you have some form of stage, keynote, things that you're doing? from a digital perspective, a big topic that's come up and I've heard is, this concept of virtual, right? And what I'm seeing is, I don't think they're necessarily married to each other. I think they're separate audiences. So you're live somewhere, but you should be having some form of digital presence in terms of maybe a virtual education hall, webinar experience that you've created, that you're marketing sort of in tangent with you being at this trade show, because you're capturing a whole nother audience that is physically not there, per se.
Yeah. And also you get the viral content from that too, that people there can share. So like it doubles down all around. Also, if you have prior to a really solid lead magnet that you could somehow distribute digitally at the event where, someone scans a QR code, whatever, which QR codes were the biggest winners of COVID. Like everyone thought they were dying and they came back. So so have some sort of extremely valuable lead magnet that people can scan, drop them into an email funnel so that you can nurture them over time. Even if you don't get to engage with them personally there, now you've collected the data and you can follow up with them. And if you're giving them really solid value, you build that trust equity without even talking to them. So I think adding all of those pieces together, including the digital presence and making sure you're organic social at the event, going live as much as possible. You're not going to overdo it, just for a small event. So you can go all day long if you want to. Try to get that viral piece, get the right people in there so that they're sharing it as well, and build that thought leadership, because it's not just your thought leadership that you're adding to the value there. It's your customers, your potential clients. Utilize that, leverage that the best you can.
You got to look like you're there. You got to create some FOMO, right? I mean, you got to look like you're there, you're in it, you're having conversation, you're at the event. I think that's like you're saying, going live a couple times, possibly, right? Creating content and building it around the fact that you are at this conference. You are at a thought leading industry conference where people are learning and gathering and engaging and communicating. All that video work, all that, live setup. We actually, makes me think, we had a customer we were working with where, from a marketing piece, there's a lot you can accomplish. They have a product and they wanted to do live installs on the show floor of this product to show how easily it gets installed, which is one of their value propositions. So the conversation, when they just roughly brought it up, it became like, oh, we're doing these live, we're recording these, we're going to schedule audience people to come in, and then turn it into an entire ordeal on the show floor. So you have to be thinking that way as a marketer during the show, meaning what can we do, garner attention, and then how do we make it live longer and outside of the event, essentially, for opportunities like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, at the event, we want to go back to the digital presence there too, and the remarketing piece. How can we get people back to the site? So again, like if you're doing a live install, for instance, and you're consistently saying, hey, our website is this, people will go to that website. Now you can follow up with them with digital presence for months and just keep building on that messaging because they were interested enough to go to the website in the first place.
So let's, we're talking like during the show, right? And one of the things we talked about when we talked about the pre-show marketing, your pre-trade show, when you're prepping, was data. So now let's put ourselves in the shoe of being at the trade show. Data is a big piece. I have some really firm beliefs on how you should be collecting data. Very simply, I think that too many companies just completely wing it. They're not ready for these conversations. They don't know how to qualify people. They're basically wading through shit and not knowing how to find the gold, right? And you need to be prepared in your conversations, dialogues, and don't just rely on your salesperson. You know what I mean? Like, have a conversation about saying, okay, how are we going to identify people? A, B, C, and D. Let's just make it super simple, right? You're going to label them A, label them B, label them C, label them D, so that this sets up what you and I have talked about is the follow-up. What do we do afterwards with this data collection? Because a lot of companies, they scan, badges, badge, and then they get done with the show after 4 days and they're just disgruntled. They're like, what is going on? They look at the list and they're like, hey, sales, here you go. Here's a list of 400 badges you might as well have a monkey at the reception desk, just scanning with nothing going on. So let's talk a little bit about the data you collect, how to organize it, and then how to create really good follow-up on the back end so you can convert.
Yeah. So I think a big piece of that is communication on the floor, right? Like, so having whoever's collecting the data, if it's just a monkey collecting data, you're getting nothing. There needs to be like some serious intent behind it. If you're just getting emails and phone numbers to get emails and phone numbers, it's going to go nowhere. Like you're going to get 1 out of 1,000 on that. And
I agree.
But if you're intentional, and I think that's a key piece for this whole conversation, is everything for this needs to be intentional. Your interactions on the floor need to be intentional. And if you get contact information, stop, take 15 seconds, make a quick note in your phone, name and something memorable about them to trigger in you when you talk to sales, or for sales to trigger in them. Oh, this one was highly valuable. They were very interested. Maybe even just come up with a quick rating system for that, 1 to 10, super simple. And 10 is like, they're hot. Like, they were highly interested right now. They're interested in what we offer. We need to follow up with them maybe the night of the event.
We need a meeting tomorrow morning. Let's get, I know exactly what you're saying.
And I think that small bit of intent falls by the wayside with events. People are just get in the mode of go, collect, rather than being intentional about what they're collecting. Now, if you are intentional with what you collect and you can somewhat segment, outside of being intentional with what you're collecting, you just got a list of emails and names. That's all you have. But if you are intentional, you can segment based on that. So if they're a 1 to 3, now we know they're not very interested right now, but we should nurture them because one day they may be, and it doesn't hurt to nurture. And then if they're 3 to 6, now we look at them differently. They're maybe in the market in the next year. Let's make sure we're giving them a sales call every now and then, following up with them. And then that 7 to 10, we need to be really hot on them. They need to get a direct phone call immediately from whoever the highest person is that can call them. They need consistent emails, whatever follow-up they need. I think that intentionality with segmentation is kind of key when you're building your own list, because if you're tapping into the retargeting piece, if they've been to your website, you can be pretty intentional with what pages they visited on your site and things of that nature. But I think on-site collection is really kind of key, that there's intentionality behind it.
That makes me think of a story from, like, I don't know, 6 years back, maybe something of that nature. I was down at the PGA merchandise show. It's a golf show. It's the biggest, golf industry show. Anyhow, a woman I know, a friend of mine, she was working with a company. They sell golf simulators, like the whole setup, a whole, shebang. So I'm walking the floor, her and I get together, we're talking. She's like, hey, let me introduce you to, to the contact that sets up this booth, because we didn't do it for them. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So, she introduces me, we get into a conversation, and their booth is busy. It's busy. They got like 8 or 10 simulators built out, meeting areas, a nice space, looks pretty good. It just felt chaotic to me when I was in the space. So I was talking to him, we're having a good conversation. He's being nice because he knows her, and he's just talking to me. And I asked him, I said, hey, why is it me or is it chaotic in here? And I was just kind of joking with him a little bit, but he's like, no, it is. And I said, well, what's going on? Why is it so chaotic? He's like, we're super busy. We got a lot of people. And I said, well, like, what are you guys missing? Because it's so chaotic. Like, what, and he was like, it's the data, like, can't follow up with people fast enough. We don't, our salespeople are so busy. And he starts talking me through it. I get him to open up about this problem that he's having. And I just said to him, I said, hey, how many people you got here from, your company? He starts to tell me. And I said, man, you don't have to he's asking me about softwares for data collection and things. I said, look, there's some great ones. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. But if I was you, tomorrow, I'm grabbing somebody from your staff, I'm handing them an iPad, right? With Excel, Word doc, the most basic stuff. You could have a scribble pen. And I said, I'm having them run around to these simulator areas. And they're on top of the salespeople every 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever the sync is. And you're walking up and saying, hey, Jill, who'd you just talk to? Hey, Dave, who'd you just talk to? What's going on? What was that conversation like? Is there follow-up there? Is it an email? Where are they from? And boom, 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 just getting the information in timely, because your salespeople are having 50, 60 convos a day. And then they forget. And what are they doing? They got a bunch of data, they're sorting through it. You're bound to screw up. So I think that's a good problem to have, but it goes back to what we're talking about intentionality. And you don't have to overthink it. You just have to, I love what you said about the ranking system. Okay, 1 to 3 is going to get this. Okay, 4 to 6 is going to get this. 7 to 10 is going to get this. It's just, you have to have some systematic approach so that you can follow up and create some success.
Yeah. And I think, I don't think I know, most people at events are ignoring that. They'll set up an iPad kiosk and just collect names that way. Or their sales team, like you said, they're overwhelmed with conversations nonstop. They're doing a great job at the conversational piece.
Yeah.
But that follow-up, it's impossible to remember exactly who you were talking to with what their need was.
What was the conversation like?
Yeah,
what was the specifics? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as a customer, there's nothing worse than a salesperson calling you and not remembering the details of the conversation. You lost my sale at that point.
Woof, just terrible.
Yeah.
Just terrible. I don't even, I know. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, actually.
I mean, it happens, especially in a busy event like that. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I like what you said about having an extra person on the floor, just following up with salespeople.
Yeah, it's basic.
Notes. Yeah. And it's something
that was just on the fly. That was just on the fly idea to me. I'm like, I would have some intern or somebody here running around. I mean, just collecting this, because you got to be having good conversations, whether it's a guy that wants to build out his garage, that make an investment, or whether it's a person that owns a PE group that's buying up golf courses. Who knows the conversations you're having, right? Yeah. And if these salespeople, they're going to remember the big one, this one. They're not going to remember maybe the unassuming conversation where they get done and they're like, oh man, like that girl, Emily, that I just spoke to, God, that's a good opportunity, I think. Yeah. And if they have that person, if they have a way of organizing, they may call Emily next week. And she may be like, hey, John, great conversation. Love your guys' product. Like, here's what I'm thinking. And you could just be missing so much because it gets busy, it gets hectic, and you just have to have these process and systems in place to really have success. You do.
Yeah. And I think being flexible, because at an event, things change on the fly. So I would say you need someone on the floor that can pivot on a dime. Like, that's kind of important. Someone that can say, okay, well, I see a problem here. I have a solution. I made it up just now, but we're going to implement it, because that's important at an event. The dynamics can change so quick. If depending on the weather, literally, like the event, the mood in the event changes. So if it's rainy outside and people walked in and they're wet, like their mood is different than beautiful weather. And you have to be able to adapt to that. And most people aren't even coming close to that in an event. They're just coming in with a single mindset. They're going to come in and do their thing. They're going to have sales there doing their thing, but they're not adapting. They're not being personable. They're not really building a relationship, which is the ultimate piece of this. If you want to have a long-time client or customer, it starts with relationship.
I agree. Let's dive into this. We're kind of teetering between during and post-show, how to collect data and then how to move forward with it. So let's say they are collecting data the right way. They are grading them properly. They are documenting conversations. They are creating follow-ups. What's some of your advice for follow-up? What are channels? What are methods? What are maybe things that people don't know that they could be doing and should be doing from a marketing perspective for great conversations, mediocre conversations? What are your thoughts on that?
I think just the consistent presence in general is key. Like, just whatever that presence is for your brand on all platforms digitally. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google, YouTube, all of the fun places, making sure that you have a consistent presence following up with there. So if you've collected emails, now you have a list that you can remarket to. So that's extremely valuable. Also, your website traffic from the event, making sure that you're remarketing all of those places. And I don't know, it depends on your sales cycle. If someone has a 30-day sales cycle, you want to have a 30-day presence, 60-day presence maybe. Someone has a 6-month sales cycle, you want to make sure you're consistently there for 7-8 months in front of them. Yeah. Really important to have that brand awareness just consistently there to reinforce the messaging that they received at the event. Email, big piece. Like, I'm a huge fan of email, like you, just like you.
Yeah,
it's
I love it.
Underutilized or wrongly utilized most of the time. So whatever go ahead.
I was going to say, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but email, to me, it's like marketing is this recurring bag of tricks. People figure something out, then they abuse it. And then what happens is every channel, everything starts to right when it's peaking, and it's when all the hacks are getting involved and people are manipulating it and not being authentic. And I think that's happening with email right now. I genuinely do. There's so many people out there that just think they can send. I mean, I got an email. I've been getting emails for the last 6 months from 2 people at the same company trying to sell me latex gloves. I don't even know how I ended up on that list, right? The first thing I'm thinking is like, okay, my job title is CEO. Who is selling latex gloves to a CEO? I don't know. Maybe at a hospital. Even then, I'd say probably not. Wrong person, right? Second is I'm in the event space. How am I getting this email? But my point is, email to me right now has peaked, is being abused. There's a lot of hacks doing it, which means there's opportunity to send personable, authentic, value-driven emails, right? And I'd say one of the strategies that I would pitch to people is, say you have that ranking system 1 to 3, 4 to 6, and 7 to 10, right? I am getting that list of 7 to 10. And there may be further action where a salesperson calls them and things of that nature. Like, they get a book an appointment thing. You're going to call them or, whatever. I would be sending them an email from your company or from the individual that says like, hey, Dave, great meeting you. Thank you for visiting our booth space. I enjoyed our conversation, right? I hope you had a great time at the show. I look forward to connecting. But I'm sending that to the 60 people that are on that list, the 20 people on that list, to let them know, I know you were in my booth space. I know we had a conversation, and it's just a touch point. It's not salesy. It's not asking for anything, and that's it.
Yeah, and it's personal. Like, that's important.
Yes.
That they will feel seen and remembered, which means they're important to you and your company, which is so valuable. You want to deal with people that think you're important.
Yes.
You don't want to deal with someone that's just brushing you off and you're getting the same generic email that everyone else is getting. And I think that is key for long-term success or success in an event. If you want to be more successful, you have to collect that little bit of data, that 7 to 10 data, that 3 to 6, those pieces of data are invaluable for you because your messaging has changed for each one of those groups. And a 7 and a 10 are 2 totally different people too. A 10 needs a call.
Of course.
Like,
yes, definitely.
Right then.
Definitely.
But they can get the same touch point as far as, hey, I remember you. And even if you can touch in, I wonder, I hope your wife's doing well. I know she was sick and she couldn't make it out this weekend. That type of thing.
How good was your conversation, right? How good and how detailed. And that goes back to what we said about during the show. If someone's collecting notes and conversations and I'm a salesperson, I'm saying, hey, I just had a conversation with Emily from here. These are all the notes and details. You may be able to go back to Emily that next week and say, hey, did your dog make it out of surgery? Everything okay with your dog? How's your kids or something, because you remembered those things. I think the personal touch is huge and it builds the relationship. It creates some trust, right? You talk about the trust building from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's truth. It's, the devils are in the details all the time. The devil's in the detail. What am I saying? That's off, isn't it? I don't know.
I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Is it? Yes.
Yeah.
It's something about that, but it's the fact that details matter. Like when people do that, they feel seen, they feel heard. I think it's really important. I kicked you off track on the email thing, but I thought it was something I should get out there. So we're talking, you have good lists, you have good data, good contacts, they're rated. What are some things we're implementing? Yes, email campaigns, right? So different ones, specific, maybe the lower half's going on a nurturing list of just your normal value-driven newsletter, things of that nature. The top ones are getting a, hey, I see you email. What are some other options for people once they have this data from the show?
I think the segmentation piece is key because once you segment it, then you can have different messaging for each group on all platforms. If you're doing paid digital, anything on the paid ad side, if your list is large enough, you can segment and then have specific messaging for those for each one of the groups. And that's an extremely important piece of this. Also, what are you driving them back to on the website? Because most people aren't going to call you right off the bat. They're going to go back to the website. That's where you need to reinforce your messaging. Do you have a specific landing page, one, for the messaging they received at the event that echoes that? Because your display is different than your brand because you're standing
that,
out at an event.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So are you echoing that with the landing page that you're driving them back to, and reinforcing that message so that they feel comfortable? They're not feeling tricked. They're not feeling duped into, oh, now they're someone totally different than what I thought they were. Drive them to a landing page that is relevant to what they experienced at the event. And once you do that, what are you doing to engage them further from that landing page? If they're a 1 to 3, like whatever, like just keep them nurtured. Yeah, give them some value. Continue to give them value. Eventually they could be a customer. But if they're higher than that, what are you doing to engage them further? Are you offering a free consultation? Or are you like really saying, hey, we actually want to have not just a consultation, we want to sit down with you on a Zoom call and actually work through this problem with you and see if we're the right solution. Like that's an important piece, because everyone just wants to sell. But I've had plenty of conversations with digital marketing where I sat down with someone and I was like, this can be a great client in the first call. And then halfway through that call, I recognized that they weren't going to be the right fit for us. Yeah. But I was able to give them value. I was able to say, hey, this doesn't make sense right now for you, but if you implement these things, you will see the results from it, and you can do that in-house. And being able to do that with a client is the biggest thing ever. So being able to segment, driving people to a relevant landing page based on what they engaged with, and then what is the right offer for that group of people or where they stand in life. Yeah.
It's the follow-up's interesting to me because I do think, again, going back to what we talked about originally, it is a sales and marketing cross-function. It's both, right? What are sales plans? You can't dump bad data to them or just a bunch of pile of junk. They need information. They also need to know who's getting what marketing, so they're not double dipping on some of that stuff. Like, I think that's really important. It has to be in unison. So let's wrap this up here. Give me, what would you say are some of your biggest takeaways? Like, we're talking about marketing pre-show, during show, post-show for a company exhibiting at an event. Like, what do you want to leave people with in terms of like advice, thought process, philosophy, anything like that you think is super important they should take from this?
Yeah. So I think the major pieces are messaging, know your messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Inside and out. Also, how does your messaging at the event slightly differ from your traditional messaging? Because it will, because you're there for a specific purpose. So acknowledge that, make sure your team is very aware of that on the floor. Who is your audience at the event? Because if you're at a trade show, everyone there is not your audience. There are specific people there, specific job titles that are your audience. Make sure your messaging speaks to them. And then data. How are you using all the data available? Are you tapping into the lists that are available prior to the event, through the event? Are you able to buy those lists? Are you able to get retargeting measures set up early on? And how are you capturing leads prior to the event with a lead magnet on your website or free strategy call, whatever it is? And then at the event, how are you collecting data? But not just how are you collecting it, how intentional are you with that data you're collecting? And are you getting the right notes on the right people?
So I think to a degree, what you just kind of described in more detail, and maybe better than I was able to, is campaign. Like, treat your trade show, like, for you marketers out there, like, your marketers, stop not thinking like a marketer when you get to the trade show function of what you have to do. Think even further like a marketer. Create a campaign, right? Create a year-long campaign, a 4-month campaign, a 6-month, whatever it is. Campaign has a start, campaign has a finish, and a campaign has intention, right? It has language, it has purpose. Create that for your trade show. Start thinking in that way. And I think that's kind of what Bobby's describing. That's what I would say is one of my biggest takeaways is that, as well as, lend a hand out to sales, bring them in, get them involved, be on the same page, same team, because I think from there you can you can really execute well. You really, really can. When you put some thought into it, you can see a world of difference very quickly. And if you start doing it over and over, whether it's 2-3 shows a year or one show just every year, it just has a compounding effect on the results.
Yeah. And I think that post-show, post-event, post-campaign, we'll say that.
Yeah.
It's important to evaluate what were the hits and what were the misses.
Yeah.
And that follow-up piece is extremely important for the next event. What worked, what didn't work, what part of the post-show, pre-show, during show, what knocked it out of the park, and what just really missed the mark. And then tweak those things, because it's really just incremental improvement each event that gets you astronomical growth.
Yeah. All right, Bobby, that was fun, man. I really enjoyed having you here. I think it was a good conversation. Honestly, it's one that we're just going to like continue to expand on. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you kind of, throwing the knowledge around there.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks, everybody. That's another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Talk to you later, Matt.